Hey everyone, it's Suede with Coaster Explorers, and today I'm going to be reviewing a roller coaster that, in my opinion, just gets way too much controversy surrounding it. Without any further ado, let's take a look at Orion, Kings Island's Giga Coaster. Orion is another fantastic product of Bolger Mabillard, or B&M for short, who is a very well-known coaster manufacturer throughout the industry. Orion opened in 2020 at Kings Island. It stands at a height of 287 feet with a drop of 300 feet, and with those stats, Orion just barely grazes its way into that category of being a Giga coaster. And I want to go ahead and address some of the Giga, non Giga arguments because it always comes up even 4 years later. And my stance is it might only have a 300-foot drop, but it does exceed that 299-foot cap of being a hypercoaster. I'd also much rather have a Giga coaster with a 300-foot drop than the lift hill being 300 feet tall and the drop only being 287 feet. Sure, it would have been nice if we had gotten a taller Giga coaster, but my complaints, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the video, focus more so on the layout. Because realistically, an extra 13 feet isn't going to make, a massive difference if the layout doesn't change. Also, if we're counting coasters like Magnum XL 200 and Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia as hypercoasters because they're 200 feet tall, but the drops are less than 200 feet, then you pretty much have to count Orion as a Giga at that point. Moving on from that, let's start by looking at Orion's layout. And you're going to start your journey by dispatching and absolutely flying up that 287-foot lift hill. Once you crest the hill, you're going to drop 300 feet, reaching a top speed of 91 miles an hour, and you're going to go into the first element, which is a 174-foot banked airtime hill. Coming out of that, you'll fly up into a 202-foot horseshoe turnaround, followed by dropping back down into a 56-foot airtime hill, which doesn't seem very tall, but that thing flings you out of your seat. Following that, you'll enter a 147-foot airtime hill, followed by a helix, which is an interesting placement because you don't really see helices mid-ride like that very often. Upon exiting the helix, you'll pass under the lift hill, banking to the left through two additional airtime hills into that massive final brake run. So I'll start by saying that I really enjoy Orion and I'm glad it's at my home park. I never got to ride Firehawk, but I'm sure I would much rather have Orion there, this massive Giga coaster, compared to an old school Vekoma flying coaster. The ride is very smooth like most newer B&Ms, although it's starting to get just a little bit of a rattle mid-train, but depending on the weather, how fast it's running, that can really vary. Sometimes I notice it, sometimes I don't. The restraints are your typical B&M Hyper Giga clamshells, and they're really some of the most comfortable restraints that you're going to find on a roller coaster. Just like all the other coasters at Kings Island, operations on Orion are fantastic as well, with dispatches usually having a train already going up the lift hill before the next one even hits the brakes. Orion is a very just thrilling, good, high capacity roller coaster, and it's the Giga coaster that people have been wanting for years at Kings Island. In terms of Orion's layout, most of the airtime moments provide really good airtime. The drop feels like you're falling forever, and if you sit in the back row, you get absolutely ejected. The small speed hill is one of the highlights of the ride, and it flings you out of your seat no matter what row that you're sitting in, as does the final hill that's going into the brake run. The airtime is great in the front and the back, but I really prefer the front row on Orion just because of the speed, the wind in your face, just that combined with the airtime makes for a really good ride. Unfortunately, as much as I enjoy Orion, I have to point out some of the big issues I have. And I know I said most elements provide airtime, which they do, and the airtime that you get on Orion is fantastic. But there's one element that has always fallen kind of flat for me, and that is the first banked airtime hill. I've ridden Orion on both sides of the train, probably in all the rows on the coaster, and that element has never done anything for me. I mean, I've ridden Orion on a 90-degree day when it was running probably in peak condition, and I've never once gotten airtime on that banked airtime hill. It's a really cool element. It looks awesome. I don't think B&M has ever made an element like that on one of their coasters before Orion, but it just doesn't do anything for me. The horseshoe turnaround is also a little questionable for me, mainly because it just drains so much speed and it doesn't really give you any super unique forces. I actually like the placement of the helix mid ride, but you lose a lot of speed right before that because you have this massive airtime hill and then you hit a trim brake on that hill, so you a lot of your speed is gone by the time you go into that helix. If they would dial back that trim or just turn it off, the airtime would be way stronger on that hill, and the helix would probably be more of a gray out moment. I understand why it's there because you don't want, the GP to constantly gray out on this coaster and kind of get leery of riding it, but the helix just doesn't do a lot. Which it depends too. I mean, some people have a higher tolerance for graying out. For example, Carter on this channel, he tends to gray out on the helix a lot more than I do. So it may just be me as well, but for me, the helix just doesn't do a lot. My only other issue with Orion is that by the end of the ride, you've picked up a lot more speed. So they definitely could have added an element or two. I understand the price of steel was high, but I don't know, the speed fluctuates so much throughout the ride, but you end off with so much leftover speed. It just feels like they could have added a couple more elements to really burn off some of that energy. Again, I'm very glad and grateful that my home park has a Giga coaster, and I would much rather us have Orion than nothing, but I'm not going to pretend like it's a perfect roller coaster either. For my final score, I give Orion a 9.5 out of 10. It may not be the tallest Giga, but it is still a Giga, and it's a fantastic addition for the park and is well loved by many. I think people should appreciate Orion for what it does rather than just comparing it to something like Fury 325. I myself used to only really compare it to Fury, but once I took a step back and started to look at Orion for what it does, I gained a better appreciation for it. So, what are your thoughts? Is Orion your favorite coaster at Kings Island, or do one of the other coasters rank higher? Let us know down in the comments and make sure to hit that subscribe button to catch all of our upcoming vlogs and reviews. This is Swade with Coaster Explorers, and I'll see you all again soon.